Hi, my name is Joy Jangdhari, and our special guest is James Bisker, who manages the fire protection program for the U.S. Department of Energy and has over 35 years experience in fire protection engineer. Prior to working with the Department of Energy, he managed design projects for various firms and has worked with architects and engineers in and around New York, including the Waldorf Astoria, Ellis Island, and office buildings in Jamaica, Queens. Welcome, James.
Well, thanks for having me here, Joy.
So, James, what does a fire protection engineer do, and how did you become one?
Fire protection engineer deals with the infrastructure of homes and businesses and communities in protecting lives and property from fire, from the effects of fire. We design sprinkler systems, fire alarm systems. We work with fire departments and planning fire station allocations, and encouraged to pursue the career through my physics professor in my junior college.
Great. So what were the three most interesting projects that you worked on, and why?
The three projects that I can think of over these 35 years primarily deal in the New York area and in Washington, D.C. The one interesting project that I think is poignant would be that working at the Ellis Island. We worked for an architect firm who was developing at the time renovation to the entire Ellis Island, and he wanted my company to come in and look at how to manage the fire protection at Ellis Island. And I had the opportunity to look at the main building and to go and look at the hospital area that at the time was all overgrown and crumbling. And so walking through these old structures just gave me a sense of history, and which is important to me, and preservation of the history, because if there's a fire, that history goes away. So that was an interesting aspect looking at Ellis Island. A second one that was interesting was the time I spent in New York doing work with the Waldorf Astoria, which was a 3-month project dealing with top to bottom look at how the Waldorf Astoria's infrastructure was set up, and gave me an opportunity to go through another history project of walking through the infrastructure of the Waldorf, which is very unique.
Beautiful.
I mean, it's very opulent on the outside,
right,
and on the inside, all the opulence has a huge infrastructure underneath it and around it to bring this opulence to the public. And so that was an interesting project. A third one that I recall was my work at the White House, where I did fire alarm and sprinkler systems for the West Wing, and I had an opportunity to go through that infrastructure, which is a 3-story, it's a basement and 2 stories, and we did a sprinkler and fire alarm retrofit, and we had to do it, of course, when the president wasn't around. So 3 o'clock in the morning, I'd get a call, and we'd have to go and travel to the White House and walk the caverns of the West Wing to figure out how to put sprinklers in there.
Right. Wow. So how did your education, did it come easy for you?
I either had to go into the military or go to a junior college. So
those were your options,
That
right?
was my options.
Okay.
And so I went to a junior college, and like my physics professor basically gave a lecture on the University of Maryland and the programs at Maryland, and one of which was fire protection engineering. And based on that, I stumbled into the program.
So what does the Department of Energy do And why do they need a fire protection program?
Well, the Department of Energy is a organization, executive branch organization, which is in charge of our stockpile of thermonuclear weapons. It's we design the weapons, and we produce the weapons for the Army or the Air Force or the military, the Department of Defense, that will deploy these weapons to however they decided, whatever processes they're using. So we'll produce and store these weapons, and with that production and storage is waste products, and so we manage the waste products, and we also deal with the national labs, which are around the country doing research for us. So a lot of the innovative research that we get comes from the Department of Energy.
Oh, great.
And they need a fire protection program because of the hazards associated with all of that stuff.
Right. So what is an interesting challenge facing your discipline at the Department of Energy?
One example is the fact that we have some structures which are thousands of feet below the earth, and one in particular that is someplace called the Waste Isolation Pilot Project, which is the nation's repository for some of this nuclear waste that we have. It's a salt encapsulated repository. So we've created a labyrinth underneath the earth where we're storing this material that will, the way that the SALT project works is the salt will creep in on itself. So it's 3 inches a year. So we dig out something, we dig out our access, we put this material in, and then we go away, and the earth crushes it and stores it for 100,000 years. That's the science in a nutshell. But to do that takes many years, and there's a lot of hazards involved with building this labyrinth, and so the fire protection for that is very unique because we're in a structure that's moving in on itself. So we have to deal with that, and that's a very interesting aspect.
Wow. So why did you pick this field? Tell me a little bit about yourself.
A little bit about myself. I was basically brought up as a third child out of 6, and in a very blue-collar community in northern Baltimore. So I stumbled upon this thing very early on, and it's been very satisfying to do this type of program.
We hear all about the ranking of GS. What is all that about? Like GS 1, 2, 3, 4, 10, 15? What is that?
The Office of Program Management, OPM, is the acronym. They've established a series of classifications for employees of the government, and those employees are all based on GS grading. Recently, certain organizations have moved away from the GS grading, and they use different grades that the executive group within that would define the system. But the GS is called General Service. That's another acronym. And my series is 804. It's a fire protection engineer, GS 804. Now GS step 1 through 15 is the level of GS grading, and within each GS grading there are 10 scales, and they're basically pay scales. So that's when you hear someone say I'm a GS 10 step 3, you can figure out what basically they're making per year. I spent 25 years with the DOE now, so I mean that's a lot of time. I mean.
So how do you stay focused and stress-free?
Yoga.
Yoga, very good.
I started doing yoga approximately 4 or 5 years ago. After I read the book, and I have to put the plug in, Eat, Pray, Love.
Oh.
And I just got enamored with the idea of, you know, going off to an ashram and
Funny.
keeping quiet for a weekend at a time, or even a week. I think she did it for a week. But from that book, I said, I'm going to have to do some yoga. So I was basically the first guy in my instructor's class.
Wow.
And when I came in, I was just as nervous as all get out, because I didn't know anything about yoga. And the instructor just, oh, thank you, a guy. So I was the only guy in a yoga class for a number of years.
And it's funny because they say yoga started off with men. Men were the ones that did yoga, you know. So just a little note on that.
But yeah, with yoga, I've learned to not only reduce stress, but also muscle pains and any inflammation. The stretches and the poses have done very well for me in keeping the pain out of my body.
What do you like to do for fun, James?
For fun, I like to go to the beach.
Great.
I have a place at the beach, and I also bike ride, and it's a very nice feeling to.
What an informative day. Yeah. Feeling.
It's very nice to take a 22-mile ride along the beach or around the beach, because it's all flat.
Yeah, wonderful.
Headphones on and trying to go as fast as possible.
Wow, physically fit.
Yes.
How do you work in your routine? Is biking and yoga and
yoga, biking, and free weights is what I'll do. I try to balance as much as possible all three, and so I'll bike, and then I'll do yoga after the weights, because the weights will stretch you, but the yoga will stretch you a different way, and it balances out.
So do you feel like you have a balanced lifestyle with all of this? I mean, it seems like you balance work well, and you have a routine here, so that's great. Let's talk a little bit about that, the balancing of work. And do you sometimes go at work and say, oh my gosh, I just need to go do yoga, or how do you balance all of this? Because I know a lot of people, they work from morning to night, and they just can't seem to pull themselves to take care of themselves. What would you say to a person like that who's in that position?
Well, I used to, before I worked for the Department of Energy, I used to be in a high-pressure design profession where projects had to get done by a certain time, and it was a highly stressful situation to be able to, to have to spend 12, 14 hours a day doing a design that would be required to be in the next day. So yeah, it got to be pretty stressful, and how I dealt with that was weightlifting at the time.
Oh, I see, at the time, yeah.
Which progressed into these other things of bike riding and yoga as I got older. But mostly I would go and lift weights, run, and that's basically how I dealt with stress.
Wonderful. How about traveling? Do you travel a lot in your work, and do you give any kind of education to people?
Yes, part of my profession, running the program, is to do a seminar or a workshop, and I do that. And I have a list of people that give presentations every year on various fire protection topics.
What are some of the topics?
Lately, we've been dealing with new types of fire suppression systems, which are very interesting in that you there's a push to reduce water on for water damage, or in my case, we have a lot of materials that react with water. So cutting-edge fire suppression systems are a hot topic right now in my community, and one of which is something called a vortex system, which uses very little water, and the water droplets are so small you can't even see them. And the water droplets with nitrogen mixed together can reduce the oxygen level enough to keep the fire from propagating.
That's amazing.
And you can't even see the water droplets. So it's a very promising fire suppression system that's coming out, and people talk about that, and they talk also about certain parts of the program at their sites, which they find successful, and they want to share that information with other sites. So we would all get together and talk shop and try and get economies so that save the taxpayers' money.
So who comes to these seminars and workshops? I mean, who are the
a lot of safety people, throughout the department would meet, and it's
right. There's a lot of interconnectedness here.
Yes.
And so I guess you have to depend on each other a lot here.
Yeah, there's my colleagues and I, we know each other. We've been around. I've been doing what I've been doing for 25 years. Most of the colleagues that I do business with or I work with, they're friends, and we're all interested in one common goal, which is to protect the public, and that in and of itself is very rewarding. In that we are very passionate about our work, and sometimes that passion gets into the actual physical policies, and when we meet at these workshops, we get passionate about what we're doing, and sometimes the passions turn into pretty much almost sometimes shouting matches, where one person would want to do something one way, another person would want to do it another way, and the personalities get involved. And
so who figures that part out? Who says, no, this is the way it's going to be done?
That would be the committee that I work with. It's called the DOE Fire Safety Committee. I'm the chair of the committee, and I'm charged with trying to figure out what is best for the department that I can take forward to my management and promote as something that they need to consider, and that's the DOE Fire Safety Committee.
Oh, that's great. Give me an example of how you help the public.
Well, we have objectives in our policy statements, and one objective is to prevent the on-site or off-site release of hazardous material to the general public. So how I would prevent that is, or how I would meet that objective would be to, let's say we've got a lot of water involved in a system, a sprinkler system, and it's putting its product, water, on a fire, and that water is going to be moving somewhere. And so the idea would be to keep that water from going into the streams and leaving the site. So we take a pretty hard look at the after effects of the suppression system and how it impacts us. That's just one way that I can think of right now.
That's great. Is there any connection here, fire department and what you guys do? What is the connection, if there is?
Yeah, there's a connection. a part of this program, the Department of Energy's program, is to manage also the fire departments, how their needs, and to create a set of policy statements that would make sure that the fire department's needs are met. So we do that through something called a baseline needs assessment, which is a 3-year assessment of our fire department at each site. So it's all staged. I mean, the sites will stage their BNAs, is what we call them, every 3 years. And in the BNA, we look at a whole bunch of things that would impact the fire department. Staffing is one.
Okay.
There's a real serious concern about staffing levels, equipment. Equipment will change over time, and so we look at that. We make sure that they have enough adequate equipment, the maintenance of the equipment, the training of the firefighters in responding, and the preparation of the fire department itself in going to a particular facility to fight the fire. We do something called fire incident pre-plans, where each facility has a plan that the fire department would use to go about putting a fire out, and it has there's a whole structure with the pre-incident planning that we deal with.
So James, what kind of hobbies do you like to do, or do you have?
Yes, Joy, I have hobbies. My current hobby right now is working with my son in building drones.
Drones?
Building and learning to fly drones.
Oh my God.
My son and I decided that we were going to try and use drones to do fishing, where we were going to take a drone and use it to draw a line out and drop a line on surf fishing. And so we started building these drones,
right.
And we got one built that was basically the size of a small lawnmower.
Wow.
And it sounds incredible to have these propellers work and lift this thing up. It's very loud.
How high does it go up?
There are limits. I think my son was telling me that the FAA has limited the drone to within visible sight and 400 feet. And so
how does this work?
Very carefully. If you've got this big machine going up in the air with these propellers they're made of carbon fiber, and they're pretty strong. So if you don't know what you're doing, you get cut pretty easily.
Wow.
And the key element to a drone right now is learning how to fly the thing with the controller.
And how does that work?
It's very slowly.
Coordination, a lot of coordination here?
Yes, very slowly. If you don't do it right, you could destroy the drone. And we've gone through 3 drones testing.
Wow.
Destroyed 3 of them to get to the point where we've got now one that we can start using to go with the ultimate plan, which would be to take to the beach and use it in surf fishing activities.
Did you try it out yet?
We're still in the learning phase on how to use the controllers, because it's that difficult, because you have to trim your propellers have to be trimmed a certain way so this thing can fly level. If you don't do it right, it's gonna tip and it could fall right out of the sky.
Wow. Well, I just want to thank you so much, James, for joining us today. And it was a pleasure just listening to how it all works, because sometimes, we just don't know how these things work. So thank you so much for joining us.